Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to today's meeting. It's being recorded, as you may be able to see, and we've got three speakers today. In alphabetical order, we've got Lou Shuttleworth, who is a corporate trainer. We've got Jenny, sorry, not in alphabetical order. In alphabetical order, not particularly. Laura Tweedy, who's a barrister at Gatehouse Chambers, and Jenny Reid from Wandsworth Mediation Service. I'll allow them to introduce themselves because they know more about themselves than I do. So I'm not sure who wants to go first. Lou, do you
That'll be
want?
me. That'll be me.
Okay, all right.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're here to talk to you about a case study about schools training and the sort of crossover with mediation skills and helping young people resolve conflict. I'm Laura Tweedy. I'm a barrister in real estate litigation. I've been a property barrister for 17 years. I'm also a mediator, and I love mediating. As I litigate for a living, I increasingly want to settle disputes and not litigate them. And I know I'm among good company. And so I'm keen to continue and develop my mediation practice. Over to you, Lou.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. So I'm from a very different background to probably most of you. And I originally trained as an actor, and I worked as an actor for nearly 20 years before I had my daughter. But like most actors, alongside that, I did other work. And I always say I was a terrible waitress. And luckily, I realised I really enjoyed teaching and training, working with children and young people. And then so I started using drama teaching to teach other subjects, and that very quickly became things like anti-bullying. I worked with the charity Kidscape that you may have heard of, and things like going to secondary school, mental health. And about 10 years ago, I linked up with Wandsworth Mediation and started working with them and trained as a mediator. And we'll come back to that a bit later on. I'm also halfway through training as a counsellor now, so that's obviously quite different, probably from a lot of you guys. Jenny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. So my background's also litigation. I used to be a lawyer for 13 years, and then I thought that when I had kids, I didn't want to go back to work in the city. So I trained as a volunteer mediator with Wandsworth Mediation Service about 15 years ago to do community mediation. And then for the last 8 years, I've been managing the charity alongside Lou and Laura, and also I can see lots of our other mediators on the call as well. Hugh, Giselle, and Michelle. Hi, and sorry if there's anybody else. So yes, I again, like Laura, you know, over a decade of being on one side of the argument, it's much nicer to be in the middle, isn't it? And more constructive. So yeah, you'll hear from me at the end of the call, but I'll leave you with Lou and Laura now.
We're here to talk to you about a scheme set up by Wandsworth Mediation Service, and you're going to hear from Jenny in due course towards the end of this talk. And what this was is Lou and I went into a secondary school in Wandsworth, and we essentially taught conflict resolution to these young people who were having significant difficulties at school and at home. Over 7 weeks, we went in 1 day a week, and we were able to have such a positive influence in the way these young people approached conflict. And to be frank, it was, wasn't weekly conflict, it wasn't really daily, it was, hourly conflict in some of the situations. And we've been invited today to talk to you a little more about that. And we're going to cover the following 6 things. I can't stop the barrister in me from keeping us on a structure. And so here we are, the 6 things that we'd like to talk to you about. 1, the purpose of schools training. this schools training. Two, some of the content to deepen your understanding, and we want you to be flexible and open to maybe playing a game with us. And three, the crossover with mediation. Four, the sample activity we play with the young people. Five, we're going to share some of the feedback from the latest school we went into. And six, then I want to talk to you a little bit about potential crossover with commercial businesses here and what we can do to expand this out. And then we'll hand over to Jenny at the end to tell us a bit more about Wandsworth Mediation Service. So over to Lou for the purpose essentially of this schools training.
Yes, thank you, Laura. So, so the course that we've created is called Reflect, and as I said, I created it with Wandsworth Mediation Service, and a number of years ago, I ran the course for the first time, and that was with young people who had already been excluded from mainstream school. But what has tended to happen is that we run it in schools with those young people who are at risk of being excluded. And so these young people are identified normally by the school, and we work in a small group of no more than 10, 12 young people. And the course is designed to give young people tools to manage their emotions more effectively, and also to give them the skills to communicate more effectively when they're in conflict. So it is very drama based, the course. There's a lot of forum theatre. If you don't know what forum theatre is, it's when you use sort of role plays to solve problems and explore feelings of different characters involved. We also do lots and lots of games, lots of debates, there's artwork, and there's alternatives for those who don't want to join in the drama, but you do normally find that they all are quite keen on doing that, because these are often young people who enjoy moving around, and they obviously don't get to do that much in their usual lessons. So as Laura's sort of hinted at already, this, you probably have heard of peer mediation in schools. That happens quite a lot, but this is a different way of using mediation skills to help young people to manage emotions and manage conflict. And so for one example is that we put a great deal of emphasis on the theory of reaching win-win outcomes, because these are often young people who feel quite defended when they go into conflicts, and for various reasons they might have quite low self-esteem, and it's really important to them that they realize that we're not asking them to be doormats and suddenly just, you know, give in to everyone. So that's an example of, you know, some theory that's really empowering to the young people. So I'll hand you back to Laura now.
And so now moving on to some of the content, we wanted to give you a snapshot of sort of what it's like when the training takes place. We want to immerse you in what it's really like for these children, and to keep you engaged and interested on this grey Wednesday morning. So before Lou deals with that fabulous content that she basically made from her head, which is amazing, using her background in acting, I just wanted to talk to you about something that was worrying me. And you might think, right, I'm going into the schools, I'm a barrister, I'm not a teacher. And I was really worried about managing the behavior in the schools. And, that might be something that sort of would occur to you. How do I, as a mediator, go into this school and teach, essentially? And Lou and WMS were sort of careful in their sort of selection of, the type of person that might be appropriate. But Lou came up with this really great approach, which I think actually, again, has crossover with mediation. So in advance of the day, the first day when we're there substantively to get started, we all sit in a circle and we go around the room and make a contract. We make a contract about how the behavior is going to be managed and how the behavior what expectations we all have of each other about the behavior. So it's not sort of us putting on to them. They say, I don't want to be talked over, one person talk at a time. They say, you know, respect each other. They say whatever comes in the room stays in the room. And then we literally write it out on a big bit of paper and stick it on the wall. And it's fabulous. And I can see a crossover there. You know, when we do a mediation, we have our mediation contract. So already right from the beginning, it's sort of got this sort of similarity, but just being really carefully and cleverly adapted for the young people. So I'm going to hand over to Lou now to give you a taster of some of the content.
Thank you, Laura. So one of the things we're always really keen to do is to make sure it doesn't feel like normal lessons. So often schools will give us a special room, which is what happened at this school in Wandsworth we recently ran the course in. But if we are in a classroom, we'll move the chairs and tables aside so they get to move around a lot. And normally we would do this game in a circle, but I have adapted a version to play online, and Laura and I don't know whether anyone's going to be up for joining in, but this game, the purpose of it is really partly it's a great way to get the young people relaxed with each other, and also it's a way of slowly introducing definitions of conflict and conversations around conflict. So to adapt it for online, it's called The North Wind Blows. And so the way it works is the person whose turn it is, which is currently me, says the north wind blows on all of those who, and then I'm going to finish that sentence. And if what I say applies to you, then you pretend to be blown off your screen. So for example, if I said the north wind blows on all of those who are not wearing shoes, then anyone who's not wearing shoes, oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much to all those people who are joining in. And if you didn't get blown off, maybe that's because you are wearing shoes. So Laura, I think you were the last one back in there. So Laura,
So
would you like to have a go?
The north wind blows on all of those with brown hair.
I did once have brown hair. Nice, very good. Thank you, Laura, and thank you again to everyone who's joining in. So we then moved that on to make it about opinions. So it might be the north wind blows on all of those who think dogs are better than cats. Oh, controversial. Nice. And then there's often lots of joking around and comments and discussion that starts to happen. Is there, you know, what, you think chocolate's not the best flavor ice cream, you know? And so that then leads us into defining conflict as disagreeing with each other and differences between us, and then it also opens up conversations around, does it matter that we disagree about the best flavor of crisps or the best football team, and what would it be like if we all agreed? And so it facilitates a discussion around what is positive about conflict. And also a key message is about what is positive about feelings. And I'm just going to try and share my screen, fingers crossed. My laptop has been a bit tricky today. Oops, sorry. There we go. And this poster is one that I really like and usually discuss with the young people, because it's a really clear example of how sometimes it's necessary to get angry in order to bring about change. And we have big discussions around how we're not looking to eliminate anger. When we have feelings of anger, resentment, jealousy, whatever they are, they're giving us a message, and we need to listen to them and learn to use to express the feelings in an appropriate way. And obviously that's when we lead on to talking about things like I statements, and again using lots of mediation skills in that context. And then we usually play a very silly game, which we won't do now, to get to the idea of introducing win-win outcomes. As I said before, that's one of the first things we do, so that they know that we're looking at giving them tools to make sure that they come away happy, that everyone comes away happy from a conflict. And then there's a very, very silly, story that Laura and I are just going to act out for you briefly now, where we tried to find the win-win solution to this conflict. And you may have heard of this example before. The idea is that there's one orange left in the whole of the UK. There's absolutely no way of getting another orange, and both Laura and myself want the whole orange. So we then ask the young people, what's the win-win solution? And they, of course, say, cut it in half. And we say, then say our first line, which, Laura, what's your first line?
I want the whole orange.
Yeah, I want the whole orange. So that's not going to work. So then they're often quite punitive, the young people, and quite quickly it comes up, no one gets the orange. So that's, and then we say, well, what's that? And of course, that's a lose-lose situation. So then we continue going through the story. Laura, what's your next line?
I want the orange to make some orange juice because I'm not feeling well, and I've been told that if I drink the juice, I'll feel better.
Well, I want the orange juice to make a cake for my grandma. And then we ask who they think should get it, and you know, Granny normally wins. There's generally agreement that if it's cake for Granny, that trumps everything. And they're still unable to come up with a win-win solution. So Laura, what's your next line?
I'm worried that I'll feel ill for a really long time.
I can really trump that. My granny's just got out of hospital, and I want to give her a cake to cheer her up. And what's your next line, Laura?
Hang on. I don't know why that went away. I need the inside of the orange to make my juice.
Well, I need the peel of the orange to make my cake. So then, of course, the win-win solution becomes very clear. And so we just find that's quite a helpful way for the young people to grasp exactly what we mean by win-win solutions. So that also leads us on to the idea of the iceberg, which obviously you're all familiar with. It's really simple and clear for teenagers to understand. And we start to apply this iceberg idea to their own conflicts, and also to help them to see the other person's point of view. So I'm sure we've probably seen these before, but young people love these things. So I don't know if anyone wants to type in the chat or call out or anything what you see here, or just have a look and see what you think.
Come on, Martin, what do you see?
Well, I see a vase and I see two opposite faces.
Very good. So you can see both of them, which is often okay with that one. What about this one? This one's a bit strange. See, I like the way everyone's like this. So you might see a young person, a young woman looking over her shoulder. Her chin is there and her nose is there. Or you might see an older lady with a scarf on her head, and there's her mouth, there's her nose. Well, there's some people shaking their head, they can't see it. We have had young people refusing to leave the room until they've managed to see both things, and then you get half of them going, look, it's there, and then some of them going, I just can't see it. Yeah, that's another one. And here's just a couple more examples. And obviously, this is a really key bit of conflict theory that is very important for the young people to realize, just quite simply, that their point of view, their way of looking at a situation is not the only way of looking at it. That if I say that this is a duck, then I'm right, and if I say that it's a rabbit, I'm right. So the conflict escalator is another key concept, which we look at the behaviors which escalate conflicts. And they often do role plays, and they love acting out escalating conflicts. And then when we watch them back, this is an example of how the role plays are used. When we watch the conflicts that they have been creating in small groups, we then, as you can see, they write on post-it notes all of the behaviors that are being shown that are escalating it. And then we, you know, continue with the course, saying that we're going to give them the tools to firstly avoid stepping on that first step of the escalator in the first place, and secondly to come back down when things have started to escalate. And they find it's such a sort of simple, clear image that they find very easy to relate to. And one final thing that Laura thought it might be useful to mention, I won't make you play this game, it's pretty much impossible online, but there's a game we play called Red Rag, which involves a lot of running around. And then we use that to link into the idea of looking at what might their red rags be. You know, when do they feel like the bull who can't help but charge? And obviously we would call those triggers. And then they they usually quite enjoy, they seem to find it very therapeutic, just saying all the things that wind them up. And then we discuss, of course, why is it helpful to know your triggers? And obviously, so you can avoid those situations, or if you are going into a situation where you're likely to be triggered, you can prepare yourself, making sure you're not hungry, tired, worried about something else, and all of those kinds of things. So there's a quick snapshot of 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 the course content, and I'm going to just hand you back now to Laura to start talking about the feedback.
Thanks, Lou. It's great. It's so enjoyable for the young people to sort of be at school, but they are playing games and doing drama in this sort of quote lesson. And so they really engage with it. Now I just want to sort of touch back on the crossover with mediation, and the sort of 10 things that just sort of rattled off my head about how this is a crossover. And you could probably tell me a load more that you've seen. If you want to, please feel free to put it in the chat box. But one, I've talked about the contract. We have a contract in both situations about what's going to happen, the parameters. We have that for managing behavior with the young people. Two, they're in conflict. In a mediation, the parties are in conflict, usually at litigation stage. And the young people are in conflict with their teachers, their parents, you know, other people in the neighborhood. Three, from my experience as a mediator and sort of being in this schools training, they're entrenched in their positions. It's very hard for them to see the other side. And so these games that Lou plays are amazing to sort of get them to think, oh, but I am right. I am right. Oh, but they're right too. Oh, what? And so that's a really sort of interesting crossover, because in mediation they're very entrenched as well. As we all know, two sides of the litigation. Four, the young people, in my experience, need to be understood. That's key for them. They need to feel understood. And many of you'll be aware, what's one of the very first things we do in a mediation? We get the parties to get their story out to us. They need to be heard in a mediation like the young people do. 5, we all know about our active listening skills in mediation and about how important that is to be actually listening to what's being said. And these young people give you the tiniest nugget of information. You've really got to be alert and listening to what they might say, because that tiny nugget is actually sometimes major in their life, and they're sort of giving you a little like grain of rice when actually the issue is sort of the paddy field. 6, in mediation, in my experience, the parties need to understand the negative side of the litigation. They need to see what is the worst case scenario, and what happens if they don't settle, how bad it's going to be for them. And the crossover here is the young people start to understand the negative of the conflict in their life. They see, oh, right, life doesn't have to be this way. This is a real negative that I'm engaged in. And they see the detrimental effect on themselves. 7, in mediation, we'll all then, encourage the parties to see life post-mediation, what you're going to do when you settle this and how wonderful is it going to feel. You'll be familiar with that sort of language. And that's exactly what we're doing with these young people. We're teaching the young people their own skills to move them past the conflict, move out of it into this positive frame of mind. 8, in a mediation, you tend to approach the strengths and weaknesses of the other side's case to say, look, what do you think about that? Or, you might or you might not, depending on your mediation style, but you might say, what do you think about that point they've made? Is it a good point? Is it a bad point? But you're sometimes looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition. And that's exactly what we're doing with the young people. We're showing them that what they see from the other person is the tip of the iceberg. All the other person that they're in conflict with, they just think they're terrible and wrong. But actually all they're seeing is that top little bit, and all of that stuff going on for the other person they're in conflict with is super relevant. And I think that's really powerful for the young people, that they just haven't thought before this course about all the other stuff going on for other people. I mean, as adults, we don't. I've had someone doesn't reply to my email for 2 weeks. I'm like, what have I done? Why haven't they replied to me? But it's nothing, usually, sometimes, hopefully, nothing to do with me. It's to do with them, and their cat's died, or they're busy, or, they've got a massive case on. And so if that's hard for us as adults, you can imagine how hard it is for the young people. 9, you want in a mediation to see the weaknesses in your own case, and the young people learn their red rags. This is not really relevant to what this dispute is. I'm just triggered, as we say, or I'm subject to a red rag here, and how to recognize them to avoid conflict. And the last thing, what we're looking to do in mediation, I think, is a win-win for the parties, where they come out of mediation. Although when I was trained, people said, oh, it's a lose-lose coming out of mediation. If no one comes out happy, that's a positive. And I don't really agree with that. I think what we're looking for out of a mediation is a win-win. Both parties to stop it, end it, and be done with it and walk away happy. And that's exactly what we're teaching the young people. So that's my sort of brief analysis. If anyone has sort of some other things that they see from this brief amount of training, I'm interested if anyone else wants to sort of shout out or write in the text box if there are any other sort of crossover skills you see. Because you might think at first, oh, I'm going into a school and training young people about conflict, but I'm a mediator. It's not necessarily the exact same thing, but there is such a crossover. No, I must have covered everything then. Excellent. So now I'm going to move on, I think, briefly to start to talk a little. I'm just going to do a little bit about the feedback we received. So that's sort of the bulk of what we wanted to talk to you about today. And then now I'm going to move on to tell you just a couple of snippets of feedback, and then Lou will go into a little bit more detail. So the head of learning in this school observed, after this 7 weeks of training, fewer incidents of poor behaviour amongst the participants after the session, and that they demonstrated a level of maturity that wasn't there before. And I mean, I just feel that's amazing. And the one that really stood out for me, the one that sort of almost brings a tear to my eye, is one of the girls said that when she was in conflict with a teacher, she'd bitten her tongue for the first time ever. She didn't even know she could do that. And you can imagine the impact that has on her life. If she now has been taught, because she hasn't been taught it at home or at school so far, that actually might be about me, I can bite my tongue here. Imagine how different her life trajectory is with that. So Lou, over to you now to share. I think you wanted to share a slide or two and pull out some quotes.
Yes, that's right. Yes, so we have some some quotes that you can see here from the young people. It gives you something to look forward to each week if you struggle at school. It's like motivation, and it's a fun way to learn to manage your feelings and emotions. The young people, we ask them every single week to fill in a certain amount of feedback. And a very, very clever colleague of ours has, analysed all the data, and this is how it came up, that 99% felt respected and supported by the trainers, 100% felt safe, and 99% felt that their voice was heard and taken into account. And these were things we obviously wanted to monitor anyway, but it was also part of the funding requirements. Here's some more. 77% felt more confident managing conflicts after the training. 100% said they could use I statements as a tool for expressing themselves. 85% can name 3 ways to calm down when they are stressed or angry. And 85% said they learnt strategies to talk about their feelings in a calm and clear way. So we were really chuffed with the way they responded, the young people and the school. And I'll stop sharing my screen and hand you back to Laura.
Thanks, Lou. I'm putting you on the spot here. We haven't prepped this one, but you know the I statements. It just occurred to me that we know what they are, but some people.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone not know what an I statement is, or does anyone want us to explain a little bit more about that? A little head nod, and I can see your hand up. Yeah, I can see a few head nods and hands up. Are you happy to?
Yes, certainly, yes. Well, we do actually a simplified version of it with the young people. I think there are slightly more complex ways that adults learn. And it's basically a way of avoiding blame language, and which is something we look at all sorts of different ways that young people place the blame on the other person in the way they speak. But the idea is that instead of, usually in a conflict, we start off by saying, you do this and you did that, and you always that, and you never this. And that instead of beginning the sentences with you, we begin all the sentences with I, and we say, I feel, and name a feeling. And so the structure of it is 3 parts, and it's basically, maybe I feel sad because, and then we encourage the young people to say exactly why, so that we get specific and avoid generalizations. So it might be, I feel sad because you just interrupted me a few times. And then we make a request. We say, please don't do that. So I feel sad because you just interrupted me a few times. Please don't do that. Or please listen to me. So it's a very simple idea that's extremely difficult to apply. But I think both Laura and I have talked about this, and I've found it transformative in my personal life, and professional life in a way. And even with the young people, it's sort of like, I feel disappointed because everyone's talking and fidgeting at the moment. Please, would you listen to me again? And then, because you've talked about your own feelings, the young people respond really well to that. And it has a number of benefits for all of us, but also for the young people. Firstly, it means you're taking responsibility for your part in the conflict by owning your feelings. Secondly, it makes you look inside and think about, like, okay, well, so what is happening here, and not just putting it all over there. And again, as I touched on earlier, when we say things like you always and you never, those generalizations obviously escalate conflict. And by being very specific about what it is that the person has done, then you make it easier for them to hear it. And finally, obviously, politely making a request by saying please goes down better than stop interrupting me, so yeah, those are I statements. I feel because, please.
Thank you. And I use them with my children all the time now. Like, I feel frustrated that you're shouting at me. Please stop. I feel frustrated that you're hitting your sister. Please stop. Now, very brief last point from me. Corporate crossover. Many of you are in the corporate world who are on this call. And when I was in this setting in the school, working with Lou for the first time, my sort of brain was going off. I'm dyslexic, and so some sort of dyslexic brain doing something. It was like this just crossover here, like with the corporate world. Like, this is what staff need to be taught, you know, adapted from children, young people, to adults. And I think Lou won't say this about herself. She has the skills to put this into a different environment. And if you're interested maybe in your staff getting trained in law firms, I think even in barristers' chambers, sort of the office assistant role, the sort of clerk's role, I think, you know, it's so relevant to us as adults, and so relevant in the corporate world. I was even thinking, you know, in financial services, the way people deal with each other. And then I was thinking, even in like scouts, it would be cool to go into like a scout group, wouldn't it? And like teach the scouts or the leaders and school governors. That's a lot of conflict, isn't it? So I was just thinking, if any of you are interested in Lou's skills here, for putting this into the corporate world, please get in touch with her. I've already put our emails into the email chat box, and we'd be delighted to help you any way we can. And then the next plug is WMS. Most of you know, absolutely life-changing organization. Amazing. So Jenny's going to give you a few words now, and WMS's email is also there ready in the chat box for when you get off this call and are like, I must help WMS. There's the email ready to go. So thank you from us for having us. You won't probably hear much more from us unless you've got questions, but over to Jenny now.
Thanks, Laura and Lou. I just kind of want to give you a bit of background about WMS and how we got to this point of doing this kind of work. I think, so we were set up, we're a charity. We were set up 20 years ago this year by Stephen Rattle KC, who's one of the top mediators in the country, according to Legal 500, I think, and Chambers, not just my word. And his vision was to help people in our community in Wandsworth, which is where he lives, in dispute. And originally we started doing neighbour disputes, and then that added on to intergenerational, so same members of the same family, like aged parents with or siblings, adult siblings. It developed a bit more into co-parenting disputes. And at the same time, our model, our USP is that we do commercial and workplace disputes, and we charge for that. And then our workplace, our community, our neighbour, family, and intergenerational is free. And the money that we generate from the commercial and workplace went to fund the community-based stuff. So we've got about 50 odd volunteers who all give of their time on the mediation services, and we've trained up 20 conflict coaches as well. Because I don't know whether you see this in your practices, but it is counter human nature to mediate, isn't it? That if you're in a dispute with somebody, actually people get entrenched in their positions. And I know that you're dealing perhaps more with financial based or situations that need resolving for a different reason. But when you have community-based conflict, or within families or neighbours, then people can be reluctant. So we've broadened our offering over the years to also equip people and empower people, and this is part of where the schools work falls in. So we do training alongside our mediation service, and we've been doing that for a long time, but it's really picked up because I think often people aren't even aware that they're in conflict, let alone want to resolve it with an independent mediator. And so we've kind of gone around the side, as it were, and offered community training in excuse me, communication skills and conflict awareness. So the I statements that Lou was talking about, we've run community workshops, we've gone into organizations and charities in our borough and also nationwide, and taught people these skills. Because I don't know about you, but Mine were picked up badly from divorcing parents, which is why I became a mediator. You know, nobody sits down and teaches you these skills, and that's the feedback we're getting from the kids in the secondary schools, is that they're learning brand new life skills, which actually, as Laura said, can change their whole life trajectory, particularly the secondary school pupils that we support. So we offer training in mediation. We do workplace training when teams have conflict within them by perhaps one person or a group of people. We try and help people, support people at work. We also go into the community and we offer 6 workshops that range from listening skills to expressing yourself to straight talking and how to stay well when you're in conflict. And that can often be a stepping stone towards people then thinking, actually, I would like mediation. And conflict coaching is a lovely complement to that. So if the other person doesn't want to mediate, we do conflict coaching, which is it's very short and but it's very transformative, where you sit with the person who wants to resolve the conflict and you take them through a process conversation to help them think about how they might respond to that differently. So we offer all different types of training as well. And that the mediations, as I say, the community-based mediations are free in our community, and the training can be paid for or grant funded. So we also do peer mediation training in primary schools as well, which complements us. So we're 20. We're also in receipt this year of the King's Award for Voluntary Service, which is a sort of a beautiful kind of stamp of approval from the King for our work in our community, and like it's the equivalent of an MBE for an organisation, a lifelong achievement for that. So we're really proud of that. We've also been appointed by the Post Office to mediate disputes, not under the old mediation scheme, but under the new scheme. So that, again, it shows the calibre of mediators we have on our panels, and the quality of the work that we do. So one of the questions you might be thinking is, how could we get involved? We try really hard to balance the number of mediators and trainers on our panels with the demand for our service. So we don't have people sitting on our panels and not being on cases. So at the moment, our panels are full, but if you are interested in joining any of our panels, then drop me an email and we can put you on our waiting list for that. We're also a charity, and how we've survived 20 years of cuts in local funding and COVID is nothing short of a miracle, I can say. We've been on fumes, running on fumes for a long time. And one of the things that you might consider doing is donating one of your cases to WMS. We have some mediators who do a case every quarter or every year, and then they donate us the money that they received for that. Sorry, classically the phone's going now. And so that would be a wonderful way of supporting our work. You might want to sponsor a school. Again, what we try to do is say to schools that the schools work that we offer, whether it's peer mediation in primary or this Reflect course in secondary, schools have no money, state schools particularly, and we want to be able to offer it for free. So your chambers, your law firm, your group of people in your community might want to sponsor a school, and that's another way that you could get involved. If you're interested in the schools work, sorry, that's typical, isn't it? If you're interested in the schools work for your local area, then again, drop me an email and we can talk about the options for that. So it might be that we run it in your local schools, or schools that you might be governors of or involved with, or we train you up and we find a way to share the materials that we have developed over a long time, so that we can help spread the good work and the transformative work of what we do more widely than the schools work is currently only in Wandsworth, but our vision is to expand that beyond the borough as well. So hopefully that answers your questions about us and the context. But please feel free, if you want to, drop me an email and have a call about any of the work we do. Thank you so much for listening.
So much, Jenny. And if I'm based out in East London, Essex, so if anyone is in my area, I've sort of already got a little bit of a base. I'd love to continue to work with Wandsworth Mediation, but closer to me, because it was quite a trek to 2 hours each way to get over to this school every day. Thank you so much. I've put in the in the chat box the donate page from Wandsworth Mediation, and I've put in the school's conflict page there as well in case anyone's interested, and you've got our emails at the top. I think Dave wanted us to hand back for introductions to new people, unless you've got anything else, Lou.
Well, I was going to invite people to raise their hands electronically if you're happy to take some questions. But maybe I'd like to kick off with one, which is presumably it was the teachers or the head teacher who came up with the list of people, the pupils that you would train. Do you know how that was assessed or decided, and how many people did you have in any particular one session?
Yes, so the schools keep a lot of data on the number of times that pupils are receiving significant sanctions and things like that. So a lot of it was decided based on the ones who are getting into the most trouble, really. But there's also a great deal of thought does need to go into the group, because there's we usually say 10 is the ideal number, so it's big enough to do the activities but small enough for us to all feel comfortable and safe to be very open. And they do really bond as a group. Often they're not necessarily students who've spent that much time together before. Sometimes it is across year groups as well. So it could be, we did a group years 7 to 9, and then a group that was 9 to 11. Yeah, they're basically chosen based on those who are at risk of getting excluded or who are in a great deal of trouble. And that's usually the sort of senior leadership team put that together.
Thanks very much for that. Right, I've got Roger with his hand up. Roger Levitt, please.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Lou, Laura, and Jenny. That was really fascinating. It's very clear that you really enjoy doing what you're doing. Laura, I was interested to discuss with you the win-win versus lose-lose, because I've always worked on the basis that if people are equally unhappy, they're happy, they're content. And I'm fresh from a late night mediation yesterday where the two parties were really unhappy, but they settled because they got to that point where there was a balance, and it was I suppose one can label it as a win-win, but they definitely lost.
But we don't traditionally. We traditionally label it as a lose-lose, and I agree, that was the way I was sort of trained in mediation and sort of approached it. But I'm trying to think about it in a different way. I'm trying to I don't know what the theory, there'll be some theory behind it, but I'm trying to think of it as in actually to move, moving people. People are unhappy, but they're more unhappy litigating because one is going to be one winner at court and one loser at court. But let's be honest, even the winner at court doesn't really win because they only get 60% of their costs back in any event. So, but assuming that's the model of a win-lose at court, at a mediation, they're sort of, I would say they're not in a worse position of lose-lose, although traditionally that's how we think of it. They're actually sort of gone up a level and they're taking control back. And we know that's the major thing, is that they've got control away from the judges. And I'm trying to push it to be this isn't an ideal situation. This might not be the greatest win that you'd get at court, even if you get it, but you're still a winner compared to if you lose at court. I don't know, it doesn't sit comfortably with me anymore, the concept of lose-lose at a mediation, having done more of this school's work. I don't know, you have a lot more experience than me, so I'm interested in that discussion too.
Yeah, well, I'll let someone else have a.
We'll have it over coffee next time.
Let someone else have a question now.
Okay. Julian Roskill, please.
Thanks, Dave. I echo Roger's comment, and it's wonderful to hear you doing what you're doing. My question is this, and my background is I am actually sit on the board of an academy, and I have been involved in exclusion panels, and those are really challenging. Listening to your course, what is the age range that you are targeting? Is it you mentioned primary schools, but is there a particular age that you focus on with this course, or is it just across the board?
Well, this is targeted at secondary schools.
Okay.
And we can adapt the activities based on the age of the students, and so it is for year 7 to year 11.
Okay. Thank you.
And yeah, we adapt it to the different age ranges there. I mean, it would probably work with, year 5 or 6 in a primary school being slightly adapted.
Yeah.
Because I actually do their a lot of primary school work as well. So I can see how it would be adapted, but this is actually targeted for teenagers, secondary school.
And is the work you do? Can you travel outside London to visit schools?
Well, I'll hand that over to Jenny. I mean, I think the hope is to expand it.
Yes, it is. I mean, and I mean, obviously we've got our trainer, we have a panel of trainers who can deliver the training, and we've intentionally made it small so that with the enhanced program, I mean, we've been running it for years, but yes, and we would expand that panel as well. We've got schools that we're talking to in Sussex as well and Surrey, but it's the funding and I think in Wandsworth, we can help get grant funding for our local schools. If it's a school in Sussex, then they would need to get the funding to pay, because we can't do both things at the same time, if you see what I mean, because they know what their local financial situation is. But yes, we can travel anywhere.
Yeah, thank you.
It's also, this is all state schools that we're dealing with. If it's a non-state school,
this is a state school. The one I'm talking about is a state school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if
state schools as well, they might have the funding themselves too.
Yeah.
Well, also, I think we're going to be applying to the national, Children in Need for a big grant, so that would give us flexibility outside of Wandsworth. So if there are schools that are interested, then we keep a wait list, and either they sort the money out, we sort the money out, and then we would go to the next one in turn. But yeah, ideally, we'd love a lovely big grant from Children in Need that would help us go much broader with this, because then you're reducing the numbers that you're getting on the exclusion panels, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you're changing their life trajectory. I mean, I do think that girl who said, I bit my tongue with a teacher. You know that girl, because you can imagine the scene in a corridor of a teacher just looking over a pupil's shoulder. I've heard it all before, not you again. And the child is then empowered to express themselves differently. And then that's had a different response from the teacher. And then that child is being seen and valued and respected, and gives that back to the teacher, rather than written off and kind of with everyone putting their head in their hands, not knowing how to deal with them.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ankraj, I think you're next, please.
Hello, thank you for hosting the session today. It was very brilliant to hear about the good work that everyone is doing for the kids in the future in Wandsworth. My question was specifically for Jenny. It's nothing to do with what you've discussed. It's to do with the Wandsworth mediation service. I was wondering, do you also offer observation opportunities?
We do, but we also have a wait list, because we have to prioritize people who are already on our panel, and then when people join our panel, we need them to observe cases. So by all means, if you would like observations, let us know, drop me an email, and you can go on the waiting list. But I think but we don't have thousands of cases for lots of people to observe, but if it does work out, then obviously we can accommodate that if we can.
And sorry, a follow-up. Is there any sort of special requirements to join the panel? I've only just certified as a commercial and civil mediator on the 3rd of March.
Ideally, you come with having more experience. As I said, our panels are full at the moment. We have a good number of mediators over the different areas that we operate, but to join our civil and commercial panel, then you need to be registered with the CMC and have your own insurance. And we have our policies and procedures that you need to comply with. But drop me an email, Ank, and we can talk about that separately if you're interested.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Macaria. Hello, Bill. Are you there?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Good morning, all. This really is a good thing. I would like to actually ask a question, and I don't know whether it's Lou or Jenny who is going to be able to answer this. And I'm asking this especially because Lou did mention that she's in the middle of a counseling course. How do you deal when you're doing these trainings in secondary schools? How do you deal with the differences in culture and ethnicities, and especially in this last 2 years when we have had a lot of inward migration, especially with parents with children who are actually high school age, and they are getting into a system which, you know, they had no formal education of how to deal with it.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think the first answer is that you know, it's important to approach anything to do with cultural differences with a huge amount of a big word to use, but a huge amount of humility, and just a complete awareness of what I don't understand, what I can't understand, and to deal with it. I mean, you know, it involves a huge amount of listening, really, and what tends to happen, that there are young people from all different backgrounds, and if you want to read the full impact report, there are details of the you know, the makeup of the group in more detail, and so it's just really important to be open to hear their stories, and it can, just as with all of the young people, it takes time for them to relax enough to share, but there definitely are things that come up that are relevant to what you're talking about, and I guess, you know, everything that we do, obviously Laura mentioned the confidentiality of it. We there are safeguarding limits around confidentiality, and if we have any concerns about a young person, then we follow it up with the appropriate safeguarding lead at the school, and it's one of the things actually as well that I'd sort of said to Laura, that it can be overwhelming, the amount of need in the group, and there's a certain amount of accepting the limits of our role, which is difficult. But often when you start having conversations about any concerns, there are a lot of interventions going on, and young people are often receiving support elsewhere. So I don't know, does that answer your question? Is there anything else?
Yes, it does. Maybe you might be looking at somebody who can be of help in that area, especially having cross-cultural ethnicity experiences almost worldwide. I would really want to join you in one of your classes and just observe and, you know, understand how you go about all this, because the culture and the ethnicity of it, and especially today, and especially this last 2-3 years, I think for me it's a major one.
Yeah, and I do think we've become more aware of it in the, you know, in recent years, aware of our own blind spots, and also Jenny might want to add more, but I think we are aware at WMS, we're aware of the need for diversity among trainers, and you know, that's something that we are, you know, very much on the case with, excuse the pun. Did you want to-
100%. I was just going to say that we take diversity really, really seriously, and it's very important to us to have diverse mediators, diverse trainers, in all, from cultures, age, gender, disability, everything. It's really important. And I think particularly in our community work, we do a co-mediating system, and we try to bring into the room some of what the parties are bringing into the room. That said, we did a fantastic mediation, well, not fantastic, but we did a mediation between a Muslim couple who were co-parenting, and we had a rabbi and a white Catholic lady, and actually diversity can it's a skills-based contribution as well, but we are very aware of that. I think it's really important. I know that you see 3 white women in front of you, but actually our panels are much more diverse than the 3 of us. So absolutely. I just wanted to clarify a point about observing the schools work though, and we because of the sensitivity in the secondary schools group situation, we don't offer observing in that. You'd have to be involved with the training, because it's not, because that puts a barrier up for the young people to have a stranger in the corner of the room watching. That would not be great, but it's different for mediations.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is to just add on to what Jenny's saying. These are often young people who have been observed a lot, had a lot of adults there with notepads and things like that, and so we just have to make sure we're creating a really safe environment for them. But by all means, it would be great if you were interested in getting involved in.
I will get in touch.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
I found it earlier. Someone had described Lou and I as middle class white women, which I thought it was a joke, and that's fine. It is. I take it as a joke, but I think it's funny also because I didn't grow up. I know as a barrister, I've got to accept I'm middle class, okay? But I didn't grow up middle class. And it's so interesting that that's how I'm now described. I went to a school, just, very bad comprehensive school. And so I think I, take into the training my background as well as who I am now as a middle class white woman. I definitely sort of bring in the sort of different way I was brought up.
Yeah. And I'm also not really from a particularly middle class background either. So but some of the trainers are, and it still does work, but it all comes down to one of the things we cover on the course is the assumptions we make about other people, and and we do actually cover within the assumptions that does often cultural issues do come up in that section. But thanks. It's a really good question, and it is something it's important we keep at the front of our minds.
We're more or less full on time, but there's a question or comment from Suzanne Tager on the chat. Are you still there, Suzanne?
Hi, I'm still here. I'm sorry, I'm on camera off just because my daughter's ill, so I'm multitasking.
Okay. Firstly, can you explain what a COG is?
Oh, chair of governors. Sorry.
Oh, right, sorry. Okay.
I'm chair of governors of a primary school, and I suppose partly because of I work as a commercial mediator, I worked with the head teacher to put in a completely new behaviour policy based on Paul Dix's "when the adult changes, everything changes." And I was just wondering whether you're working with the schools as well as with individual children, because what we've seen is that when the school behaviour policy works differently, and when we work on the basis that all behaviour is a form of communication, then we also work to help the children learn the tools to self-regulate. We see different outcomes, but that's a cross-school policy. We have a nurture group in place where children spend time. So the entire school is shaped around this idea of helping children to navigate the world and give them the tools to deal with conflict, but also manage themselves, motivate themselves, etc., etc. Do you work with the schools to try and help them understand how they can create an environment which these children might find easier to operate within? Because even the way that teachers communicate when they're frustrated makes a difference to how children are able to react?
Yes, I would say we are trying to look at ways of making sure that the school is long-term impacted by our involvement there. It's a tricky one because you know, we are only one intervention. What you're talking about is a sort of massive change in approach. I myself work 2 days a week in a primary school, and we have zones of regulation and a restorative approach, and it's what is necessary is to bring about long-term change. That's true, and it's hugely frustrating. I think Laura and I both felt it when you're hearing stories about the way that adults have spoken to the young people, and you think, well, if someone spoke to me like that, then I'd, you know, want to respond as well. But having said that, very aware that teachers are up against it and having a tough time. We do know that there needs to be an absolute central change in approach in some schools. Having said that, the school we're currently about to start working with, they have a restorative approach, and for them, we are a part of their bigger approach, and they are you know, really keen to find ways to learn from us and embed more within the school system. We do some staff training though, don't we, Jenny, and particularly in the primary schools. There's
Yeah, we do, and I think like with the same conversation we were having around what mediation and counselling and different hats, I think sometimes the need is so great, isn't it, that we can't do everything. But we have gone into schools. Part of our organisational training is helping is twofold, is either helping an organisation, people in an organisation who are having conflict directed at them, and that would fit. We've trained teachers in that. And then also where you're in an organisation like the council and you're a housing officer, we've trained up people who are helping somebody else deal with conflict with somebody else. So there's a different nuance and the different training. We also offer mediation, schools-based mediation, so between a family and the school, or between two families because of issues between the pupils. So we do it on a smaller scale as well. But yes, I mean, the need is massive, isn't it? And what you say about all behaviour is communication. I think if every teacher had that written in their classrooms, I think it would change a lot of perspectives, wouldn't it? But
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, it's challenging because also I recognise that schools are underfunded and they've got to look at the best outcomes for the majority. And so sometimes I think it ends up that, particularly at secondary school, you see these very disciplinarian approaches that probably, if they're working out outcomes across the board, maybe make it easier for them to get better outcomes for the majority, but it does impact everybody in terms of the tools they have for life. The only other thing I wanted to just say was I go into a lot of law firms and deliver training predominantly to dispute teams, so that they are assisted in how to kind of navigate mediations. But when I do that, I also talk about how to help people navigate disputes, change minds, etc., etc. And that kind of nonviolent communication style I always talk to them about. And it is interesting because almost always somebody will come up and say afterwards, oh, that was really useful, I'll use that with my teenager. Yes. Which I appreciate that that's how they will think about it, even though they are a litigator in a disputes team, and that's why I'm providing them with the training. But they can clearly see that they can use it in a different context, and that, you know, also always coaching people before a mediation in that nonviolent communication style in terms of how they use the joint session, I always find very helpful. So just another additional point from me.
Thank you. Well, if we can wrap up the formal part. So my thanks to Jenny, Laura and Lou, hopefully in alphabetical order that time. And the next meeting should be on either Wednesday the 8th of May or the following Wednesday the 15th. As soon as we've got a date settled, we'll come back. I'll send an email to everybody.